Chapter 100 to 102. Enormous green vines burst through the ground, pushing up the classrooms, the playground, and all the other structures with such force that the steel bars of the foundations became mixed with debris from the buildings, creating a scene of an apocalypse. Families held their children close and fled in a state of panic, their faces full of terror. Crack, crack, crack! With a tremendous upheaval, the gargantuan plant surged forth from the earth, causing the very ground to heave and crack under its colossal weight. Its green branches, extending from the vines, were like beckoning fingers, seeking out living creatures to ensnare in its grasp. In a desperate bid for safety, a stray dog bolted away from the looming threat. But alas, it was no match for the lightning-fast vines that swiftly snatched it up. The canine's woof-woof barking was silenced in an instant, as the merciless vines drained it of its very essence, greedily siphoning away all its blood and flesh until nothing remained but a skin and bones husk. The remains of the dog fell to the ground, scattering in the wind. As the vines continued to grow, red fruits sprouted from them, and blood-red liquid oozed out, streaming down the vines and seeping into the ground. What is that? Rin and Luvia were both startled by the sight before them. Despite coming from magus families, they had not been studying Magecraft for very long and had never witnessed something so terrifying. Even Mrs. Fujimaru and Tosaka Aoi looked pale with fear, and the others were even worse off, visibly shaken by what they were seeing. "Sakura, throw away the 7 black pearls Mother gave you." A voice transmitted through a spiritual link conveyed the urgency of the situation. Sakura hesitated, glancing at the 7 black pearls she had prepared as a birthday present for Shirou. But seeing the tragic scene before her, she made up her mind and tossed them out of her pocket. The pearls shattered on the ground, releasing dark energy that formed 7 streams of black sludge. The contrast with the bright sunshine made it all the more ominous. Unbeknownst to Sakura, her adoptive mother was Tiamat, one of the primordial deities who had been abandoned and killed by her own children, the Mesopotamian gods, over 10,000 years ago. The gods had used Tiamat's corpse to create heaven and earth, and her soul had been sealed away in the imaginary space. Slowly succumbing to evil, she had gradually transformed into a monstrous beast, possessing black mud like Shirou. Originally, Tiamat was cursed by the gods and banished to the imaginary space, where she was doomed to eternal solitude and despair. But Sakura possessed the rare attribute of imaginary numbers. One night, by chance, she connected to Tiamat, who was weeping in the abyss. And so, a connection was established between them. The 7 black pearls Tiamat gave Sakura through the link were no ordinary objects. Tiamat had created them using her authority and black mud, and they contained her blessing. Originally intended as a birthday gift for Shirou, Sakura now had to use them to save her friends. The 7 streams of black mud coalesced into a single massive wave that swept over the school like a tsunami. The vines that had been attacking them were consumed and dissolved almost immediately. "What is this?" Rin and Luvia exclaimed, bewildered. "Mom is protecting us," Sakura replied. "Your mom?" Rin and Luvia turned to Mrs. Fujimaru and Aoi, who was pale and confused. Luvia looked puzzled, but Rin seemed to be deep in thought. She remembered Sakura telling her that she had a 3rd mother. "Ah, oh my God! What is that?" People screamed in shock and fear. Due to the secret activities of the Holy Church and the Mages Association, most of the people in Fuyuki City had gathered in Shinto Town. But now, a gigantic vine monster had appeared, lifting Tsukimu Elementary School into the sky. As the abomination crawled across the ground, it turned all living things in its path into bones. Giant trees sprouted from the dry earth, their roots intertwining and transforming the entire Shinto town into a soil that nurtured life. The blood-sucking trees continued to grow, forming a forest. a monster that appeared once every 50 years, leaving behind a mountain of corpses and rivers of blood, had descended upon Fuyuki City. But why is the Forest of Ainasha showing up here in Shinto Town? Exclaimed the head of the Ryugi family, staring in disbelief at the monstrous plant and the expanding forest. Equally astonished, the demon disguised as an old priest, the great demon White Mouse, echoed the sentiment, "Why is it appearing here in Shinto Town?" The Forest of Ainasha was the 7th of the 27 dead apostle ancestors. It was a forest that could think and hunt on its own, and it fed on the world every 50 years. Any creature that entered its forest became its prey, and if left unchecked, it could even turn an entire city into a blood sacrifice. The Holy Church had sent people to destroy it every time it appeared, but they always failed. However, the Church had always accurately determined its location, and they had never been wrong. But this time, something had gone wrong. Excellency Meram, can you clarify something for us? Did you give us false information because you're also one of the 27 ancestors? A Japanese exorcist inquired. I may not be fond of humans, but I don't appreciate other ancestors who betray the Crimson Moon either. My loyalty lies solely with the Crimson Moon, Meram declared. It seems that someone has been orchestrating something from behind the scenes. Who could that be? How should I know? Meram shot back, rolling his eyes. Rather than focusing on that, let's make haste and head to Shinto. Once the reality marble takes shape, that thing will undoubtedly attempt to escape. The party raced toward Shinto Town, but inside they were feeling extremely despondent. Following the Holy Church's instructions, they laid an ambush in the depths of Miyama Town and created a flawless strategic plan that anticipated nearly every possible attack by the Forest of Ainasha. However, to their surprise, the Forest of Einash failed to appear in Miyama as planned and instead manifested in Shinto Town. This one misstep resulted in complete defeat and made all of their efforts and precautions rendered useless in an instant. And as Meram had suspected, once the Forest of Ainasha materialized and its reality marble formed, it dispersed its seeds and was prepared to withdraw. Crack, crack, crack. The ground split open, and the 52-acre Tsukimo Elementary School was lifted skyward. It seemed like a floating island, prepared to soar toward distant cities. Merem, call forth the king of the land, said the elderly priest, now in the form of a white mouse. I know. Merem nodded. He established a connection with the great demon, the king of the land, who dwelled within his right leg. This demon was also known by the names Black Dog of Destruction and Whale Dog. Boom, 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 boom. As the ocean began to boil, enormous waves appeared to consume everything, surging and rolling toward the shore. Suddenly, an immense whale emerged from the ocean depths. It was jet black and had 4 legs, with a colossal body nearly 200 meters long that appeared like a towering mountain, exuding a sense of overwhelming oppression. Ordinary people would be terrified and suffer a mental breakdown upon seeing it, but the executors and Magus families breathed a sigh of relief. The great demon on Meram Solomon's right leg was the manifestation of divine punishment and the tsunami. Although it possessed no unique abilities, its enormous body of 200 meters was enough to frighten anyone. Even though this 200-meter-long body was still relatively small compared to the current 52-acre floating island of the Forest of Einash, at least it instilled a sense of power and security, right? However, swish, 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 the Forest of Einash extended its countless vines, enveloping the king of the land like a rice dumpling before suddenly exerting force. Splurta! Endless blood sprayed out from the gaps between the vines, coloring the sea in red. Did it really kill the king of the land just like that? Meram exclaimed in disbelief, feeling the king's soul return to his right leg. Although the king of the land did not possess any special abilities, its 200-meter body alone was endowed with immense power. Nevertheless, the forest of Ainasha tore the whale dog apart using such a direct and violent approach. The forest of Ainasha's reality marble. It engulfed the whale and rendered it powerless, clarified the white mouse. Meram quickly grasped the situation. The forest of Ainash possessed a high-quality reality marble, which was already an extraordinary power bordering on otherworldly. Once trapped inside the reality marble, one would be cut off from the real world and feel as though the entire world was against them. Essentially, anyone caught inside the forest of Ainash's reality marble would be confined within a concept of being an enemy to the world, albeit one that only encompassed the relatively small area covered by the forest. Currently, the forest of Ainasha spanned 52 acres, a territory too vast for the king of the land to overcome. With a mere 200-meter body and no special abilities, he was no match for the formidable force. "Meram, deploy the king of the sky," said the white mouse. "I know." Meram summoned his trump card, the great demon residing on his left leg known as the king of the sky. It was a creature equivalent in power to the king of the land, and its manifestation represented Meram's greatest weapon. In an instant, a bizarre flying beast materialized from Meram's body and soared into the sky. The king of the sky was a manifestation of freedom and an exceptional abnormality. While the king of the land was responsible for the Annihilation War, the king of the sky was designed for battles between monarchs. "Squeak!" cried the king of the sky, its sharp screech resounding through the sky. As the morning sun rose, the king of the sky's delicate butterfly-like wings unfurled, casting magical hues across the sky. While slurping on his instant noodles inside the Ryudu temple, Shirou tilted his head and glanced upward with a frown on his face. Frowning, Shirou set aside his cup of instant noodles and stood at the door, gazing into the distance. Despite losing his innate skill, clairvoyance, from the shattered saint graph of heroic spirit Emiya, he could still make out a massive floating island above Shinto, covered in lush greenery. However, he couldn't see the details clearly. The evil flower had absorbed so much malevolence that a sense of fear, terror, and anxiety hung thick in the air. Shirou knew all too well what this meant. Fuyuki City was in trouble once again. As he scrutinized the floating island more closely, Shirou's eyes widened in recognition. The architecture was eerily familiar, and a sense of déjà vu washed over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen it somewhere before. Then, it hit him like a bolt of lightning. "It's Tsukimu Elementary School," he blurted out, his voice filled with a surge of urgency. Today was the day of the school sports festival, and Shirou remembered clearly that everyone, from students to parents, would be at the school. Sakura was a student at Tsukimu Elementary School, which meant that his mom and many of his friends and acquaintances would also be there, including Rin, Shinji, and Issei. The thought of them being in danger made his heart skip a beat, and his hands trembled involuntarily. "Go back!" he exclaimed urgently. "I need to hurry!" Shirou's evil manifested in the form of two large black wings, hoisting him into the air. As he ascended, Arcade also sprouted two wings and pursued him, blocking Shirou's path with a steely gaze. "Are you finally ready to face me alone, Roa?" she demanded. "I don't have time to play with you, Arcade," Shirou snapped. "Step aside and don't provoke me." "I'm not playing games with you, Roa." Arcade's voice was filled with a murderous intent that hung heavy in the air. He pointed urgently behind Arcade. "You need to turn around and see what's happening in the city." She turned her head and was momentarily stunned by the sight. "Whether you choose to fight me or hear me out later is up to you," Shirou continued. "But for now, let me pass. Otherwise, I won't hesitate to use force." With that, Shirou flew towards the floating island, leaving the dazed Arcade behind. She hesitated for a moment before chasing after Shirou. "Are you planning to stop me?" Shirou asked, giving her a cold stare. "No, I'll accompany you first, and then end you," Arcade declared. Shirou's frosty gaze gradually softened as he nodded. But before that, you must provide me with full support. Don't push your luck too far, Roa, Arcade warned, her eyes flashing with a deadly glint. He remained silent, turning his wings into 4 powerful thrusters and blasting off toward the floating island. She followed closely behind, manifesting her own to keep pace with him. As he neared the floating island, he finally beheld its eerie landscape, a dense forest with an unsettling atmosphere. What caught his attention were the crimson fruits hanging from every plant, dripping blood onto the ground. It was a sight that sent chills down his spine. Arcade was equally astonished by the scene. "The forest of Ainasha?" she muttered. "What?" He turned to her, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Is this really the forest of Einash?" She nodded, confirming his suspicions. "Damn it!" He cursed under his breath, his anxiety skyrocketing. The forest of Einash was one of the dead apostles, a monster that fed exclusively on flesh and blood. Once inside the forest, one's very life force would be devoured, leaving behind a withered husk. Shirou's mind raced with thoughts of his friends, loved ones, and family back at the school. He couldn't shake the image of their remains from his mind, and he gasped for air as he tried to push the horrific images aside. Sakura, his mother, and maybe even his father. He couldn't bear to think of what might have happened to them. His eyes blazed with intensity as he channeled his magical energy, immersing himself in the black mud. The flames in his eyes flickered wildly as the mud churned and coalesced into a colossal figure that stood over 60 meters tall. "Oh my God!" The onlookers were terrified by the sight. First, a blood-sucking forest appeared, followed by a floating island, a massive whale, and a monstrous bird. And now a towering mud giant emerged from the ground. Could it be that yet another alien monster had invaded? Such was the belief of the common folk, while the representatives of the Holy Church and the demon-hunting family suspected it was the last resort of the burial agency. All eyes were fixed on the mud giant, which loomed over the landscape. Meram trembled as he watched the scene unfold, and even the white mouse couldn't help but shiver at the sight. "Is that really him?" Meram asked, his memories of Britain from 1,000 years ago flooding back. "That's impossible. He's been dead for ages," the white mouse replied, recalling a man who was anything but ordinary. Unaware of their thoughts, Shirou focused his attention on the forest and the safety of his loved ones and friends. With a wave of his hand, the mud giant extended its arms, stretching across the void and latching onto the floating island. Crackling! Slowly but surely, the island began to move, dragging the mud giant behind it as it slipped into the sea. Mana burst sea. Shirou's immense magical energy surged through the mud giant, imbuing it with a power akin to that of a ley line. Rumble, rumble, rumble! The mud giant shook violently, and the surrounding seawater was blasted tens of meters high. The resulting wind almost blew Arcueid away, but she managed to fix her position. "Roa, if you have such great power, why don't you dare to fight me one-on-one?" Arcade shouted to Shirou. "Because I'm not Roa!" After using a mana burst, the mud giant was able to grab onto the floating island. With a thought, the mud giant's feet stuck to the sea floor, forming a solid anchor that firmly held the floating island in place. Shirou burst forth from the mud giant and unfurled a pair of ominous black wings, soaring towards the forest of Ainashe. As he flew, he called out to Arcade, "Arcade, watch my back. Don't let the forest of Ainashe slip away." "Why should I help you?" she responded with a serious tone. "I came here to kill—" Stop talking so much," Shirou said, his voice urgent. "I'm not asking you not to kill Roa. I'm just asking you to watch out first. You can kill him however you want afterward." His heart was anxious, afraid that something would happen to his loved ones. Arcueid furrowed her brow, growing more confused by the second. "What the hell is this Roa thing?" she demanded, feeling like she was losing her mind. Standing on Mount Enzo, the head of the Clock Tower's astromancy department and the current head of the Animosphere family, Marisberry, showed a faint smile. Suddenly, he sensed the cold barrel of a pistol being pressed against the back of his head from behind. Without so much as flinching, Marisberry spoke in a gentle tone. "Mr. Emiya Kiritsugu, pointing a gun at someone's head is hardly a courteous act." But Kiritsugu was unyielding. "I don't think bringing disaster to a city that has just experienced war is a courteous act either." Marisberry raised an eyebrow. "Why does Mr. Emiya think that the person responsible for this disaster is me?" "Intuition," Kiritsugu replied firmly. "I'm afraid your intuition is mistaken. I'm not capable of bringing the forest of Aineshi here," Marisberry replied, shaking his head regretfully. Kiritsugu didn't lower his gun. "Then what role do you play in this matter?" "I hold all the clues and deduce the truth, but I don't speak of it," Marisberry admitted. Kiritsugu frowned. "If you know the truth and how things will develop, why won't you speak up?" "Because I am a magus," Marisberry answered simply. Before they could continue their conversation, a pistol was suddenly pressed against the back of Kiritsugu's head. A cold voice rang out. "Release Marisberry!" Kiritsugu's eyes narrowed as he wondered how long this person had been there. "Lev, put down your gun. It's just a little joke between Mr. Emiya and me," Marisberry spoke up. Lev Laner Floros complied and lowered his weapon, but Kiritsugu wasn't amused. "This is a foolish act," he chided. "But you wouldn't have shot me, would you, Mr. Emiya?" "Can we get to the truth now?" Kiritsugu pressed. "Before that, may I ask you something, Mr. Emiya? Do you know who Zephia Eltnam Oberon is?" Marisberry inquired. Kiritsugu shook his head. "I don't. Who is that?" Marisberry seemed to be considering his next words carefully. "Then how about the Knight of Wallachia?" Kiritsugu's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed, "Are you saying that this incident was caused by the dead apostle ancestor who massacred the entire population of Wallachia in a single night?" Marisberry simply nodded in response. "Yes, he is the 13th among the 27 dead apostle ancestors." "But that's impossible! With his reality marble, he could have easily manifested great monsters such as Yamata no Orochi or Kyubi by absorbing the fear of the people in this city. Why would he resort to such a secretive scheme?" Kiritsugu argued. Marisberry gestured toward the looming mud giant and gave a mysterious smile. "Isn't there someone who can absorb evil?" Kiritsugu was taken aback by the statement. "I see. So Shirou absorbed the evil and neutralized the effects his reality marble. But why would the dead apostle ancestor do this? And how did he manage to control the forest of Einash? We can only speculate that he communicated or traded with the ancestor or employed some other special means. And as for why he did this, isn't it obvious?" Marisberry responded. "It's because the third magic was accomplished in this city a few months ago, correct?" "Please elaborate." Kiritsugu's curiosity was piqued. Zephia Eltnam Oberon, also known as the Knight of Wallachia, was a renowned alchemist of the Mage Association. He went insane trying to find a way to prevent the extinction of humanity, and ultimately placed his hope in achieving the sixth law, which led to him becoming a dead apostle. Despite dedicating his life to the pursuit of the sixth law, he ultimately failed, Marisberry explained. "Doesn't that sound familiar, Mr. Emiya?" Kiritsugu stayed silent, well aware that Marisberry was referring to him. "So why did he come here?" Kiritsugu probed. "I already told you, didn't I? He came here because the third magic was completed in this city a few months ago," Marisberry replied. "But it appears that someone has used it to reverse the boundary between life and death. He wants to achieve the third magic to accomplish the sixth law. Is he crazy? Is that even possible?" Kiritsugu asked, his disbelief apparent. Whether it's possible or not doesn't matter. What matters is whether we should attempt it or not. Even if we wanted to try, the Holy Grail's crystallization has been missing for a long time. It's impossible to make it work. Oh? That's quite an important clue, Marisbury said, his tone piqued with interest. But the existence of the crystal itself is not crucial. What he really needs is to utilize the third magic to open the hole that links to the root. That's the key to his plan, to have another chance to challenge the law. Kiritsugu's eyes widened with shock. Wait a minute, does this have anything to do with the manifestation of the Forest of Ainashe? No, his goal is the Greater Grail. He couldn't help but recall how, after the end of the Holy Grail War, both the Clock Tower and the Church had sent their own agents to seal the Greater Grail. It was heavily guarded by executors, and he had never been able to come into contact with it. The Knight of Wallachia possessed a powerful ability, a reality marble that absorbed human fear and manifested the monsters that humans feared the most. But there was something else in the city that also absorbed human fear and malice, Fujimaru Shirou. As a result, the Knight of Wallachia's reality marble simply didn't work. Kiritsugu couldn't help but wonder, had he used this trick to divert attention and shift the focus away from his true goal? It seems you've finally caught on, Mr. Emiya, Marisbury remarked. Kiritsugu put away his gun and prepared to leave. Marisbury's face wore a small smile as he offered a suggestion. I advise you not to go after the Greater Grail. The Knight of Wallachia is about to challenge the law, an existence that humans cannot possibly contend with. You should focus on saving people instead. Otherwise, how many innocent lives will be dragged into that void once it's opened? Kiritsugu's cold gaze locked onto Marisbury's smiling face before he turned and strode off in the direction of Shinto Town. As a pragmatic killer, he understood the risks and benefits of each move. Lev couldn't help but express his concern. Aren't you afraid that he'll shoot you, Marisbury? His bullets are specifically designed to destroy magi. Marisbury simply chuckled in response. He won't shoot me, and he wouldn't dare to. Lev looked puzzled. Why not? He casually raised his hand, revealing a gun tucked up his sleeve. Because my gun is faster than his, he said with a confident smirk. Let's head up the mountain, Lev. The temple there is the safest place, Marisbury urged. Lev's curiosity was piqued, and he couldn't help asking, Why do you think that? Marisbury grinned. Because during the Fourth Holy Grail War, that place was one of the most stable locations around. Shirou molded most of the mud into a giant, then took hold of the forest of Ainashe before spreading his wings and heading towards the forest. However, by the time he arrived, the forest had already manifested its reality marble, blocking him outside of it. A reality. Marble is a powerful bounded field that distorts reality with mental images. When it's activated, it can absorb nearby objects into its own mental image, effectively blocking out any external interference. The reality marble of the Forest of Ainashe, however, was far more advanced than others. In fact, it no longer felt appropriate to refer to it as a reality marble. It was more akin to a predatory hunting ground. The forest's reality marble could automatically open and close, baiting unsuspecting creatures inside before hunting them down and preying upon them. Filled with concern for his family and others, Shirou pressed himself against the reality marble of the Forest of Ainashe, his mud overflowing and blanketing the area. A sizzling sound echoed as the vile thoughts, curses, and all the world's evils capable of disrupting the laws of the mental world began corroding the forest's reality marble. Like an abyss that consumed everything in its path, Shirou's mud devoured the thin membrane that encapsulated the mental world of the Forest of Ainashe. A gaping 10-meter hole was left in its wake, allowing his mud to infiltrate the reality marble from the inside. Before charging in, Shirou left a portion of the mud behind, fortifying the area around the hole to prevent the world's membrane from regenerating. Once inside, he was met with a voice. "Who are you to destroy my territory and infiltrate my world?" The spiritual interference of the forest of Ainashe resonated within Shirou's mind as he spoke. "I'm here to save someone." In response, the voice of the forest hissed, "Are you trying to steal my food? Then you shall become my food as well." The vampiric trees surrounding Shirou extended their branches and attacked him. If they managed to capture him, there was no doubt that he would be drained of his blood and turned into a lifeless husk. Shirou's evil boiled over, the darkness within him reaching a boiling point, and his black mud manifested in a terrifying display. 8 massive arms erupted around him, each projecting a mountainous sword that glinted menacingly in the moonlight. With a fierce swing, his 8 arms cut through the branches of the vampiric trees as if they were nothing more than brittle twigs. The air crackled with electricity as the sword struck, severing the branches from their trunks with a sound like thunder. Wherever he went, the trees were cut off at their waist, unable to get close to Shirou. "Die!" The forest of Einash began using mental interference, attempting to inflict serious harm on Shirou with its vast mental powers. Yet, the evil within Shirou surged, effortlessly crushing the forest's mental interference. To some extent, the enlightenment of the sacred fig and the evil flower of freedom share similarities. The enlightenment of the sacred fig is a result of great wisdom and is impervious to mental interference. Similarly, Shirou's evil flower of freedom uses endless evil thoughts to protect against mental attacks. As long as one cannot penetrate the shroud of these malevolent thoughts, one cannot harm Shirou with mental assaults. Shirou deftly evaded the tree's attacks, dodging their limbs as they reached for him. Meanwhile, his 8 black arms and their accompanying 30-meter swords sliced through the tree's trunks with precision, cutting them down at their waists. Despite his efforts, however, the tree's regenerative abilities proved to be a formidable obstacle, as they continued to sprout anew no matter how many he destroyed. He had been continuously using mana burst on the mud giant outside, rapidly depleting his magical energy. This level of consumption would leave countless magi wide-eyed and pale, shaking their heads in defeat. Yet for Shirou, whose magical power was comparable to a ley line, it was insignificant. As soon as Shirou stepped into the depths of the forest of Einash, he was relieved to see that his family, Sakura and classmates, were all unharmed. He breathed a sigh of relief and allowed himself a moment to relax. But as he looked around, he couldn't help but feel surprised by what he saw. It soon became apparent to Shirou that his family and classmates were protected by a thick layer of mud, acting as a shield to keep them safe from harm. The mud extended all the way to the branches of the forest of Ainashe, which were promptly consumed by the curse upon contact, as if they had fallen into Shirou's own black mud. Shirou charged straight into the midst of the mud tide, feeling a familiar and unsettling sensation as soon as he made contact. A massive wave of malevolent energy flooded his mind, piercing through his mental defenses in a seamless manner. "I can't believe there's someone like you among humans." The thought echoed through his head, but provided no further context or explanation. After a moment, the unsettling presence retreated. Shirou tried not to dwell on the mysterious evil thought he had just experienced, as it had not shown any hostility toward him, and had even seemed to be controlling the mud tide to protect his loved ones. He carefully scanned the crowd until he finally spotted his mother, Sakura, and his classmates. As he made his way toward them, he was surprised to see that Rin, Luvia, Issei, and others were also gathered around them. And then he noticed something else. The mud tide was flowing out from the 7 black pearls near Sakura. It seemed as though the flow of the mud tide had reached its end, as only 1 or 2 drops trickled out before turning into a fine powder and vanishing into the air. "Shirou, you—" Mrs. Fujimaru trailed off, her eyes widening in shock as she took in the sight of the black mud swirling around Shirou's body. Shirou interrupted her with a firm yet gentle tone. "Mom, I'll explain everything to you after all of this is over. But for now, please let me focus." Mrs. Fujimaru nodded slowly, her expression betraying a mix of emotions. Shirou turned his attention to Sakura, patting her shoulder reassuringly. "You did a great job using the black mud to protect everyone, Sakura." Sakura's expression turned regretful. "That was supposed to be a birthday present for brother." Shirou shook his head. "Your safety is the best gift you could give me." As he looked into Sakura's eyes, his own clear gaze caused her heart to flutter slightly. Rin's expression became complicated as she looked at Shirou. "Shirou, you're actually a magus." Shirou turned his head to face Rin. "Rin, can we discuss this later when we return? For now, please listen to me." Rin nodded, muttering to herself. "I'm not a child. I understand the urgency of the situation. This scoundrel." Suddenly, a surge of evil overtook Shirou, consuming him and manifesting as pitch-black armor. He then released a burst of magical energy that illuminated the area like a bright light, burning fiercely as if fueled by some unseen power. In a sudden burst of light, Shirou shone with a brilliance that was reminiscent of the first rays of sunshine, dispelling the darkness. All eyes were immediately drawn to him, from the confused to the afraid and even the hopeless, as if gazing upon a beacon of light in the midst of darkness. Shirou slowly ascended into the air, allowing more people to see him. His deep voice echoed through the area as he shouted, "People, you don't have to be afraid anymore. You don't have to fear anymore, because I'm here. He's the savior of light. He's Ultraman!" exclaimed the awestruck onlookers.